Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Pitcast, brought to you by the Pit Crew Online, from the fans for the fans. I'm your host, Deputy Editor James, and today we'll be breaking down all the action from the Portuguese Grand Prix. Joining me today is our Editor-in-Chief, Simon.
Hi guys.
We've also got our WRC Editor, Warren.
Hey everyone.
And last but not least, our BTCC Editor, Aaron.
Hello everyone.
We're quite a diverse field from across everything we cover. Right, so let's get into, well, before the Portuguese Grand Prix, the big news off the track was that Haas will be letting both Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen go for 2021. There's been nothing confirmed yet about who's replacing them. Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher are said to be the front runners. Also, you've got Nico Hülkenberg and Sergio Perez on the market. So if I want to I'll throw to Aaron first. What do you think of Haas's decision to let both their drivers go for 2021? Do you think it's a good move, or what do you think?
I think it's been a long time coming, to be honest. I think they've probably waited 1 year too late to maybe make this decision, and definitely get rid of maybe one of them just to shake things up a bit. It seems the formula at Haas has gone a bit stale. They've gone backwards clearly with the Ferrari power not being as strong as it was last season. I think, a fresh intake's needed. I'm surprised Gunter's stuck with Grosjean and Magnussen this long. After what happened on Drive to Survive, you saw all the background. So, yeah, I think fresh blood will do the team some good, I think.
And Warren, what are your thoughts? Because I was personally surprised that they let both drivers go, and that they're talking to bring in two rookies. That's quite a big decision for any team, especially quite a young team. What are your thoughts on that potential direction for them?
Yeah, absolutely, James. Something that crossed my mind really when he broke was, I can understand, Roman. He's 5 years since that podium, Lotus, the old Enstone team.
Yeah, Belgium 2015.
2015, yeah. That was a weird week for that team anyway at that point, wasn't it? So
was that when they were threatened with administration and the bailiffs were in the paddock?
Yeah, basically it was almost curtains, wasn't it? Really. Grosjean's not been great. I mean, that first season that Haas took part, they did really well, I thought. And I thought, well, okay, a new team can come in and do really well and score points from the off. So I can understand, in terms of Grosjean going, but Magnussen, young Viking, perhaps they just feel like they've got nothing to lose, I suppose. But he's odd because you'd think you'd keep someone on that would be able to, lead a young driver forward in the team. The complexities of these cars is quite big, isn't it? So, yeah, I'm surprised. The question is, can Magnussen pick up a drive somewhere? But I think there's probably not a lot of chance, is there?
Formula One.
Young guy. Maybe he'll pop up somewhere else. But, for a driver that got a podium on his debut, only 6 years ago, it's kind of a sorry sad end for him, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good point to make, because maybe I'm a bit biased because I'm a Magnussen fan, but I've always felt that we've never quite seen him in a car where he's able to show his best. He got, like you said, the podium in the McLaren on debut, but their development tailed off throughout that season. And obviously he was in the Renault's first sort of the inherited Lotus in 2016. And then Haas have been a little bit up and down since he's been with them. It's a shame we've never got to see him in a consistent team, even a consistent midfield team. Simon, do you think there's any possibility of him staying on the grid, or do you think he's going to have to look outside F1 now?
No, I think it's outside F1 and very probably IndyCar like his dad. And to be fair, I think his driving style would really suit IndyCar. I think he could be one of those drivers that leaves Formula One because he was never in really a competitive machine, go to IndyCar and absolutely take it by storm. I can't say the same for Grosjean. I think, if anything, maybe Formula E. He's held on to that seat. I mean, I'd love his manager in my life.
I've heard Grosjean was in the Mahindra simulator a lot in the last couple of weeks, so that's probably a move for him. I think Peugeot in WEC in the new hypercar series has been mentioned as well.
Aren't they?
Yeah, so that could be good. I think you're right about Magnussen in IndyCar. He's definitely got that sort of the elbows out attitude.
Exactly.
That fit well.
I think he'll be a something worth watching. You know, I don't know about you guys, but coming from I'm a big Formula One fan, and I like to watch the Formula One drivers go on to other things. So I'll watch Alonso in WEC, or I'll watch drivers in IndyCar. You know, even I've forgotten the Brit's name now, but you know the kind of thing. You kind of follow their career. I think first time I watched IndyCar was because Nigel moved there.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, I think
That was a special season as well. But that's another story.
yeah, I mean, I think the first time I watched IndyCar was for Alonso at the Indy 500, and then got into the series from there. Yeah, it'd be good to see Magnussen in that series. I think I've always had a slight, an if I could control the cards thing. I'd love to have seen Magnussen at Red Bull. I think he would have been phenomenal in that atmosphere. And he's the kind of driver, if Lewis Hamilton was coming up behind Magnussen in a Red Bull, he'd think twice about that overtake. But
this is where my cunning plan for promotion and demotion of drivers comes into effect, because instead of a driver signing for a team, they drive for Formula One. And Formula One, you get to drive a car in every race, or you get a chance to drive a car. I know it's a pie in the sky, and it's completely impossible, but it's something I've always thought of. They're all laughing at me now.
Well, there was going to be sprinklers on the track at one point, so I don't think any ideas there too silly.
Every so many laps, they have to turn around and do the track in reverse.
Yeah, that would not be bad.
I think my wife might have mentioned that once.
I know my dad always had the idea of replacing the safety car with a danger car.
Coming taxed out of the back, like hacking you.
He's driving you the opposite direction.
Exactly. So, as well as the Haas news, there've been a few rumours developing throughout the paddock that Sergio Perez, after losing his racing point seat to Sebastian Vettel, is talking to Williams for 2021, with George Russell the likely candidate to move away if Perez signs, which it's hard to tell if this is a popular rumour or an unpopular one, because people don't obviously want George Russell to lose his seat, but at the same time, a lot of people very much want Sergio Perez to stay on the grid. So if I can start with Aaron again, obviously it's still rumour at this point, but what do you think of the chance that Perez might move to Williams and the chance that Russell might be off the grid for next year if that happens?
Like everyone says, it's a good and a bad thing. I think. I mean, I like Perez. I've been a fan of his for I've admired the work he's done for with midfield teams for a few years now. But I can only see that move being purely financial on Williams's part. Perez is a good driver, and he's a great driver, but I don't think he'll move Williams any higher up than they are currently. And as for George, again, I really like George Russell. I really rate him. I think he's going to be fantastic. So I think either keeping him on the grid and getting him some experience is better. But Toto Wolff has said he will be on the grid next year. So, I mean, it has to be in the Williams or, because I can't see anything else otherwise.
No, and if playing kind of devil's advocate, trying to see it from Williams' perspective, you can understand, as much as Russell is their star driver, like you said, the benefits financially that Perez brings. And you think as well the fact that Russell is a Mercedes driver before he's a Williams driver. So there's always been that shadow over his time at Williams that once his contract is up, he's probably moving on, if not to the senior team, at least to a higher one up the grid. So you can understand why they're looking at Perez maybe as a longer term option. But Simon, I know that you're a big fan of George Russell and you're also a lifetime Williams fan. So how do you stand on this? So the chance of Russell perhaps being forced out of the team, but also Perez potentially bringing some kind of financial stability to add to the Doralton takeover?
I thought the big point of the Doralton takeover was they didn't need the money. They didn't need to bring in extra funds. So that's a little bit disappointing and maybe worrying if they're already looking at how much a driver can bring in. But if they were going to lose a driver, would you go for George, who's outqualified his teammate on every occasion? I mean, how much money is Latifi bringing in? It would seem nuts. But I guess if it does happen, I'm sure he'll head back to Mercedes as a reserve driver and will take Bottas's seat in 2022.
Yeah, I don't know yet whether the idea that Russell would be the one to leave, whether that's something that's been sort of suggested by a source within the team or just something that whoever reported the rumor first has speculated because of Latifi's funding. It's unclear whether that's the case. And like we said, this is pure speculation at the moment anyway, so none of it may be true whatsoever. Warren, do you have any thoughts on the idea of Perez to Williams?
Yeah, I mean, Perez has had a great career, hasn't he, to this point? I think, when you look at the 2012 season, what he did with the Sauber in those early races in the wet, how good he is on the tyres. He's a quick driver and he deserves a place in the sport, 100%. It's just a shame that, say, the chances of George, he's really good, isn't he? I mean, when you see what he's done with that off-the-pace car, he was running for points.
His first stint.
He was up to 7th at one point. Watching the highlights, and he's always way ahead than Latifi. Obviously, he wants to bring money to the team, and that's why he's there. But that's what Williams needed. But so Simon said, it's concerning if they still need more money, isn't it? Because yes, I guess they would move forward. I suppose with Perez, if they've got more money, they can develop the car a bit more. And so on, because it costs money to develop these cars, lots of money. And perhaps George doesn't bring that, I suppose. But I guess, it would be a shame to see George out of the team. I think he can definitely lead the team forward if they can just get the development done. They can at least do what Perez has done, I would say.
Remember, it's just a chassis. Obviously, they've got the best engine in Formula One. Just the chassis. And
Exactly. And just from an engineering point of view, I think if you think about the development, the team know George. They know how he works and they know how he likes the car. They can develop the car more to that style and that the way that he exploits its potential. To change that for Perez, would they see an immediate jump? I'm not sure. Because they've got to get used to him first.
And he's got to get used to the car.
Yeah, he knows the engine, obviously, Mercedes. It's not going to be any different, really, is it? So, is it a right move? I'd say get rid of Latifi and put Perez and keep George. That's what I would say.
I can't help but feel that Russell is one of those drivers who, could take the claim for being the unluckiest driver in Formula One, because he's, throughout his junior career, he's been phenomenally talented, going up against people like Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris and winning races against them, winning championships. And they went into the F2 championship that he won in 2018. He beat Lando Norris and Alex Albon to the title. And then, Norris got into a competitive McLaren, Albon got into Red Bull. Both of them have been on the podium. George has been stuck at the back of the grid in Williams' worst car. And then he put in all of these great performances. And the one time Williams got into the points last year, it was Kubica's car and not his. So you kind of wonder if maybe he is just cursed with a bit of bad luck with how this is playing out. But no, I seriously hope, like you've all said, if he is off, if he is out of Williams for next year, that he can go back into Mercedes for 2022.
Interesting, the two drivers in Perez and I've forgotten his name again. Magnussen. Gee, it's late. Aaron refugees, both have this habit of taking on drivers, and a bit like Red Bull now, they've kind of spat them out and left them to it. It's almost disappointing to see both of those drivers leaving the grid when, a bit like Heikki Kovalainen. He was a terrific driver. He won a race against Lewis. Just thought that was worth a mention.
Yeah, I think it's ironic as well that Perez is obviously on the market because someone's come into his seat, and it was him who had to make way at the team because of his teammate bringing too much funding. Yeah. And now he's potentially doing the same to Russell at Williams. Formula One has a cruel sense of humour sometimes. So, that out of the way, let's move on to the action on track itself. So we returned to Portugal for the first time since 1996, this time at Portimao in the Algarve rather than traditional Estoril. And the race, like most races this year started with Lewis Hamilton on pole, Bottas second, Verstappen third, Charles Leclerc putting in another excellent qualifying performance to start fourth. But at the start, when the lights went out, the start of the race was anything but the usual fare. Under cold, damp conditions, Hamilton and Bottas both struggled to get the medium tyres up to temperature. Bottas managed to get them at least in a working range sooner because he managed to overtake Lewis Hamilton at the start and take the lead, while Verstappen had a clash with Perez just behind them. But while the Mercedes were struggling with their medium tyres, it was Carlos Sainz in his McLaren who managed to get his soft tyres working quicker, who came around the outside of both of them to take the lead by over a second on lap one, which was just beautiful seeing a McLaren leading a Mercedes again. I can't remember the last time I've seen that. It was years ago, I'm sure, but it was amazing, but it unfortunately didn't last very long. The tyre advantage that Carlos Sainz had started to wear off over the opening laps as his tyres ran out of life and the mediums on the Mercedes came into their own working range. And by the start of lap 6, Bottas was back in the lead, and then Sainz was very shortly after passed by Hamilton and Verstappen as well. Bottas managed to keep ahead of Hamilton for a considerable part of the early part of the race, managed to pull away and keep a decent gap, but then he also started struggling for grip as the temperature and the track surface continued to get away from him. So Hamilton put in a couple fastest laps, caught Bottas, and by lap 20, I believe, managed to overtake Bottas and take the lead. And he stayed there for the rest of the race. As Bottas's tyres continued to not give him the grip that he needed, Hamilton cruised away to take his 92nd win to break Michael Schumacher's record for the most wins in F1 history. Bottas finished second, Verstappen completed the podium in third. How many times have we said that this season? Charles Leclerc finished fourth for Ferrari ahead of Pierre Gasly, Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, Esteban Ocon and Daniel Ricciardo were 8th and 9th for Renault, and Vettel was 10th for Ferrari. Hamilton took the extra point for the fastest lap. Again, how many times have we said that this season? And Lance Stroll was the only retirement after a clash with Lando Norris during the race. So let's dig into this. And I want to start by putting my foot in it, by saying, by starting with Simon and Warren, because you two will remember the last time F1 raced in Portugal in 1996. I was not even 2 years old then. Aaron will not have remembered it either. What was it like seeing F1 return to Portugal, even if it's not at Estoril, returning to, bringing one of these, I don't want to say historic because it makes you sound too old, but, one of these traditional races back on the calendar, even if it's just a one-off. Warren, should we start with you?
Yeah, that's cool. Cheers, James. I mean, so, crikey, that race, 1996. It was really interesting seeing the sort of the list, previous winners of the Portuguese Grand Prix, and it had, what was it, from the early 90s to mid-90s, wasn't it? Shuey was on, Hill and Villeneuve. I don't think there were anyone else had won that race during that time. And also, when you think of who's won in Portugal, we go back right back to Senna in what 85 was it?
Yeah, his first win.
First win in that huge amount of rain. I just remember seeing short amounts of video over the years from that race. It was great. I think it's really good to have a different race on the calendar. I think it does shake up the sport a bit, shakes up the team knowledge. It means that you might get a different result, or you have a slightly different challenge for the drivers because they've never been there before. They've got to work hard, harder than usual, to get the car right. Not just for qualifying but for the race. Yeah, I think it's good to have a mix up and a change. To be honest, what do you think, Simon?
Well, I'm a traditionalist. I like all the old circuits. It was a European-based World Championship. When we were in our prime. Estoril, I really remember only for testing. There was a lot of testing that used to happen in Estoril.
That's true. Yeah, I forgot about that.
It's nice to see it. I don't know. I can't imagine they'll get another one anytime soon. Not because it wasn't a great track or didn't make an interesting race, because it clearly did, but more because unfortunately the money is elsewhere now. It's in the Middle East, it's in America, it's in South America, China. So with all these places making up a championship, it's really hard. And unless finances decree that maybe we go to Portugal one year and Spain the next. I mean, Formula One, it was only ever big in Spain because of Fernando Alonso. Pre-Fernando, they were just about motorbikes. And yes, they'll have a little blip, a little bump in those figures because Fernando's back. And Carlos Sainz is doing well. But, that wouldn't be a bad idea from a personal point of view. I wouldn't mind seeing once every 2 years at Barcelona and with Portugal. I know that would work. The finance would work.
The kind of Hockenheim Nürburgring style deal. Yeah.
I mean, they're on the same plot of land, really, aren't they? I mean, I think someone said during the race that Carlos was only 800 kilometers from where he actually lives in Spain.
What do you think, Aaron? Do you want to see Portimao back on the calendar as a permanent fixture?
I mean, the track looks good. I mean, it's like Sam says, it's traditional. There's gravel traps everywhere, not tarmac runoffs. All these up down corners. It's like a roller coaster. I like these kind of tracks. That they're kind of an unknown quantity, really, because as far as I know, we've never raced in Portimao in F1 before, so no one really knew what to expect coming into it. Like I say, Estoril's a good track, but Portimao I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the highlights that I saw, and there's some nice corners on that track.
I think about gravel traps. I love gravel traps because that's proper jeopardy. None of this. We'll give you a time penalty if you go off. You go off, you can't take the risk of going into the gravel and not coming back out.
A real litmus test, isn't it? It's if you're in that gravel trap, 9 times out of 10, that's it. You're done. You're going to beat your car, but it's better than tarmac runoffs because you're kind of given a second chance on them. You can go over them, get back on the track, and get maybe a penalty.
Just remember all those classic crashes, Senna, Prost, and Schumacher Hill. They were always in gravel traps, lifted out of gravel traps or being beached on a gravel trap.
When you look at a track like Portimao, the gravel traps, and Mugello as well that we've seen this year, and you compare them to something like Paul Ricard, where you've just got these massive car parks and the weird psychedelic slowdown strips, or tracks like Yas Marina where they've got these enormous runoff areas, and you think they don't quite look as exciting, do they, as these tracks with gravel traps and grass and it might not be like engineered asphalt that slows you down a particular amount to equate to what a gravel trap would be, but sometimes the old school thing just works the best.
It just seems to be a common denominator, doesn't they? All these races with gravel traps and grass seem a lot more entertaining. Then when we go to races like Paul Ricard's, Sochi, for example, it's a procession. It's boring. We don't really remember them. I can't tell you who won in France last year.
I assume Hamilton.
I'd guess Hamilton.
Comment though is that motorbikes find it easier if they crash and they come off. It's much safer for them to go along than it is gravel. So there has to be.
That's the tricky thing with tracks these days, is that hosting F1 is so expensive that they've got to focus on so many other series just to be able to sort of make up for that cost alone. So you've got to have all these compromises to make it safe for bikes and safe for sports cars and safe for touring cars. It's a shame you can't just lay like a big piece of asphalt down over the gravel trap for the weekend for the bike race and then just lift it back off again. But
giant tarp or something.
Yeah, just a big old tarp. Like a big roll of fake grass. So as well as being a terrific race, this race was also, I know people are probably tired of hearing it about this by now, but this race was historic. It saw Lewis Hamilton exceed Michael Schumacher's previously unassailable record of 91 wins. and become the driver with the most wins in F1 history. And I know that we made a big deal about this last weekend when he matched Schumacher's record, but we're going to make a big deal about it again because it is a big deal. So we'll start with Aaron, because I know that you're quite a big Schumacher fan. How did you feel seeing that record eclipsed?
I mean, it was bittersweet. Like you say, I'm a big Schumacher fan. He was winning every race when I was a kid, so naturally I thought, well, he's cool. But like he said himself, records are there to be broken, and it takes some special driver to break that record. And obviously Lewis has just been unstoppable last 5-6 years. So you got to take your hat off to him. You may not like him as a driver, as a person, but you can't begrudge his achievements, what he's done in that car. I mean, I watched a video on YouTube off the official F1 channel of every win and when it was. And he was on about 20 wins before 2014, and now he's on 92. So that just says everything about these 6 years Mercedes have been in power, if you want to call it that. So yeah, it's bittersweet. I'm glad he's done it because it takes a special driver to eclipse Schumacher's record, but I'm just gutted that Schumacher's lost that record now.
He'll always be Michael Schumacher, though. He'll always be one of the greatest. And that's something that's come up since this, hasn't it? The debate about, does this make Hamilton the greatest? Is Schumacher always going to be the greatest? I don't know about you, but I feel like you can just say they're both the greatest. You can throw Fangio in there as well, and Clark and Senna, and all of these drivers are the greatest for different reasons.
In different times. I mean, Fangio only raced hobby drivers, really. What he did was amazing. He did, he brought professionalism to the sport, and won all those races at a great age, I might add. So he was brilliant for his time. Schumacher was brilliant for his time. The way he moved people around him and got a team working around him. And I think Lewis actually learned something from that. Senna, again, I mean, how can you leave Senna out of that equation? But it's a different generation. And you'll get but he's in the best car in the best team. All the best drivers were in the best car in the best team. How many times do we have to say the same thing? Bring right to the top. That's why we're all writing for the pit crew.
What was the MP4 if not one of the greatest F1 cars of all time? Yeah, and it's bizarre to think that you've got a driver like Niki Lauda as well, who never had that most wins record. Senna obviously, tragically lost his life before he could challenge what was Prost's record at the time. It's amazing when you think about the drivers who have held this record, and also the drivers who haven't, but that would still be considered some of the greatest in the sport.
It's that consistency, though. I mean, to do it over that long a period of time at that level is brilliant. I keep comparing him to Federer in tennis, but he really does remind me of that. He's going on. He's probably going to get another 3-year contract. Next year's probably a given, not a given, but it shouldn't be too dissimilar. Then we see what happens in 2022. Until we get to 2022, nothing's really going to change, I'm afraid. So prepare yourself for some more.
If Hamilton wins at least one race next season, then he matches Schumacher's record for the most consecutive seasons with a win as well. Schumacher's got 15, Hamilton's on 14. Which of course,
record sacred.
No, which of course for Hamilton is every single season that he's raced, which is another phenomenal thing. The fact that he's managed to win races in every single season as well. And it's not always been, like you said, in the best car. You think of the 2009 McLaren, he still managed to get that to the top step of the podium. Warren, obviously when Schumacher set the record at 91, we all said it would never be broken. And now Hamilton's broken it. Was it 14 years later? Do you envisage any of the drivers on the current grid being the ones to break Hamilton's record, or do you think we haven't seen the driver yet who might even come close to it?
Very good question, James. That's a quality question. I think possibly Vettel. No, sorry, not Vettel. Possibly, I was thinking Verstappen. I don't know why. Maybe Vettel can. I don't know. That's a really interesting point. He's on what 53 wins, isn't he?
Yeah.
I suppose if things go well with Aston Martin.
Yeah, he knows what they can do.
We know he's quick. But I think probably Verstappen, in terms of the age, how old is he now? What, 23?
Yeah,
23.
23.
I think, yeah.
How old Lewis now? I don't. 30 something.
35,
I'm not sure actually.
85. He was
And
born
what
on it, January 85.
on
35, yeah.
9 wins now, isn't he?
Yeah.
Schumacher won all those races. There wasn't as many races in a season.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, they've got.
Now there's more races.
Different, but they've gone too far. And we shouldn't be finishing the season late November. It just feels wrong, you know. Break to build up that anticipation of a new rules.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about this before, haven't we, Simon? I think there are too many races. I've heard rumours about 23 races next year.
Yeah, there's been reports the calendar's going to be up to 23 races. I can't imagine all of them making it. I think Brazil's on the provisional calendar, and that's up for debate at the moment.
That would be a shame.
Yeah, exactly. What circuit?
If it's the new one, no one's interested.
Yeah.
No one will. I think we should all boycott it. You know, do not cut down rainforest for a Formula One.
No, that's ridiculous.
That is bizarre. F1 on the one hand is saying, you know, we want to be a sustainable sport, we want to be a carbon neutral sport, but also let's cut down a rainforest to build a racetrack.
No problem. It's only one little rainforest.
Yeah, we'll put another one up somewhere else.
They'll go carbon neutral and say, yes, but we planted 100 trees over here.
We planted trees on Interlagos. We've gone on a massive tangent there.
Oh,
A whole other can of worms for another podcast, I think.
I feel like we've opened up so many cans of worms in these podcasts.
They're all just sat on the shelf waiting to be tended to, I think.
Yeah, Crew Towers is just full of worms. Oh, so where were we? We were talking about Hamilton. So 92 wins is a phenomenal achievement. And like we're saying, you can argue all day long who was the greatest driver in F1 based on this statistic or that statistic. It doesn't detract whether you think it's Hamilton or not from the fact that he has set an incredible benchmark in the sport, and the fact that he's going to keep on, like Simon said, he's going to keep on extending this. And this is something I started working on an article just after the race, looking at the previous drivers who have held this record. And the fascinating thing is that up until Prost, drivers would normally sort of set their record and then stop, either in the case of someone like Ascari or Jim Clark, that they sadly died shortly after and couldn't continue it, or Fangio and Stewart both set their records and then retired almost immediately after. But the fact that you've got someone like Hamilton who is able to do what Schumacher did, you know, beat the previous record and then still have years afterwards able to continue going. I find it fascinating that we're able to watch the history of the sport being written right in front of us.
That's the thing about it, isn't it? You know, like everyone says on Twitter, we are in a special period. We are seeing something incredible in front of us, and we should really just enjoy it while it's here. You know, he's going to retire eventually when he's hit 150 wins, probably. But you know, and then when it's over, it'll be wow, what have we just seen? You know, the thing about Schumacher hit 91 at the very end of his career. You know, really, at the end of his thing. But Hamilton just don't look like he's going to slow down anytime soon. He's still such a fit person at 35, you know.
I feel like every year he seems to sort of hit a new peak, and every year we come back saying, yeah, he's really at his peak this year. It's like he's been at his peak for 5 years now.
It's going to end, yeah. It's got to end. But one thing I do like about the way that Lewis has gone about his winning is there's been none of his team orders moving over his teammate, like we saw with Schumacher, with Irvine and Barrichello out front. Even to the point where, you know, the tyres were for him. They were designed for the way that he drove, and to see his teammate win a race, you know, was rare and unusual and surprising. So I like the way the Lewis has gone about his run of extraordinary success. Really, it's
It'll be-
not been done in a subterfuge way, shall we say? Which I feel like kind of hangs over Schumacher's legacy a bit, personally. Great driver though, Shui was.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Should we
There's
talk?
always a cloud over him, isn't there? There's always a cloud over Schumacher over how he won his races, what he sometimes would be willing to do to win them races or championships in Jerez 97, for example. There's always going to be that hanging over him. But yeah, like Warren says, Lewis don't really have anything like that. Just been ultra consistent and ultra quick.
Should we talk about some of the other 19 drivers who are on the grid?
Not a bad idea.
Portimao. Because there were quite a few, as well as Hamilton, there were quite a few real standout performances on the grid. I just want to run through a few that jump out to me. Charles Leclerc finishing 4th in that Ferrari. He's been sort of every other race really been able to drag something extra out of that car. Pierre Gasly finishing 5th. Esteban Ocon put in a mega stint on his starting tyres. I think he pitted something like 10, 15 laps from the end, if that, and managed to finish in the points after starting out of it. And then, of course, the one that I think we all should start with, Kimi Raikkonen. He didn't come away with a point. He finished P11 in the end, but he started P16, and by the end of lap 1, he was in P6.
It was brilliant. Brilliant.
That was a phenomenal opening lap. Simon, do you want to talk us through what you thought of that?
Like many others, it reminded me of Senna at Donington. He just went for it, and it was just like it was like gameplay, wasn't it? Really, darting in and out, avoiding crashes and getting to the front. And you just if he was still in a competitive car, what would he have done? It's great to see. He's 41 years old. He's older than me. No, don't say anything, Warren. It's our secret.
That's the thing with Kimi, is that he is 41, and I can't remember. It's been a while since we had an F1 driver in their 40s, full stop. But being that competitive, like people have been saying for years about whether he'd be quitting F1, whether he'd have enough, but he just seems to, like Hamilton, just have an extra something every year. Yeah,
it's lovely to see. We all love Kimi. No, has anyone got a bad word to say about Kimi, really, ever?
I'm sure a few interviewers would, but
yeah.
And I was watching or rewatching earlier his battle with Carlos Sainz through the first couple of corners. I can't remember what lap it was on, but Sainz retweeted a video of it, saying that it was so cool to battle with Kimi, saying he races you so hard but always gives you the respect. And that's something that we've always seen throughout his career, is that he will battle so hard, but you can trust him to battle you. And Aaron, what do he is obviously approaching I say approaching, who knows how long he could be in F1. We're probably in the last few years of his career, but when he's still able to pull out performances like this, he's not embarrassing himself by any means. How do you think that Kimi Raikkonen's going to be, talking about drivers' legacies, how do you think Kimi Raikkonen's going to be remembered when he's still able to put in performances like this in an Alfa Romeo in his 40s?
Yeah, I mean, it's astounding what he's doing. Like he said himself, for him, it's a hobby at this point. I don't think he's too bothered about winning championships as much or races, but he's just enjoying being out there. I think in terms of his legacy, he's always going to be remembered as that ultra quick, flying fin, every cliche about Scandinavian drivers you can throw at them. It's a crime he only won one championship, really. When you think about how quick he was in the McLaren years, I think he could have had one in 2003, but I think he's just always going to be remembered as this, especially in this era of social media, as like a I don't care attitude, bit of a meme lord, if you want to use that terminology. Just he seems different to all the other drivers. All the others are very professional. He's just very laid back. He's whatever. I don't care. And I think it's really refreshing. I love it personally.
I don't know about you, but I always love seeing Raikkonen as the oldest driver on the grid, going wheel to wheel with people like Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen. And these young talents coming through. Warren, what do you make of seeing, these kind of two generations really battle?
Yeah, I think it's great for the sport. I think it's particularly with let's bear in mind that Kimi's still the last Ferrari world champion as well.
Yeah.
And it's incredible to think that that's now 13 years ago. That's just bonkers in itself. We should definitely have had some titles, 2012 with Alonso and so on. So, yeah, I think it's really good for the sport. I think it just shows it doesn't matter how old you are. If you've got the talent, and then you can show that, and you can fight. And I think you probably saw the experience, in being able to deal with unusual track conditions, coming through there. And possibly a bit of his rallying sort of experience as well with Citroen all those years ago too. After he left Ferrari at the end of 2009. So I think it's just an element of all of these factors and his experience coming all together at this moment in time. And just it's a shame he didn't score any points. I think that's a real shame.
I think Sainz said something
I'd love to see him at Williams. I'd love to see what he could do with the Williams.
I love what Hamilton could do in Williams.
Chuck that in there.
I think Sainz said something about Kimi's rallying. He said when he was talking about himself overtaking the Mercedes at the start, he said the track was so slippery he had to rely on the rallying instincts his dad had given him. And then when he was talking about Kimi, he said, yeah, I think he relied on his rallying instincts as well in that opening lap.
Yeah, for sure.
So one of the other standout drivers we mentioned, Pierre Gasly, finishing 5th for AlphaTauri before behind the top 3 teams. He's been one of the standout drivers all season, I think. Even if you set aside his Monza win, he's still been putting in phenomenal results in a midfield car, especially considering the circumstances of last year and how that could have started a real downward spiral. He's bounced back perhaps even stronger than he's ever been in F1. Simon, what do you think of the way that Pierre Gasly is kind of I want to say comporting, I don't know if that's the right word at all, but the way he's displaying his talents on track at the moment, there's maybe not a chance of him really going back to Red Bull. They don't seem that keen on him, but he's putting in a good show for any other team on the grid to take him on, surely.
He's doing the world of Formula One a great favour and sticking his fingers at the Helmut Marko. From the point of view, I think it's fabulous because I know they want young drivers, but they, like I said with McLaren before, there's become the danger that you're just taking on these young drivers and expecting too much of them. Not everyone's a Lewis Hamilton or a Max Verstappen. Some people need time, some people need an arm around them, some people need to be shouted at. No football analogy really, but they just got behind. They're going to have to get behind Alex, really get behind Alex now, because they made a mistake dropping Gasly. Clearly they made a mistake. So, and Gasly's done so well, hasn't he? He's such a likeable guy. And does no wrong on track at the moment. He's ultra quick. If there's no room for him at Red Bull, where will he go come the end of his contract? I can't see him wanting to stay at AlphaTauri long term because they're always going to be a midfield team. Don't seem to have the ambition to challenge their sister team. I don't know if that's even allowed. It seems a bizarre scenario to me. But yeah, he's doing really well. As is Alex. I don't care what anyone says. I think he's doing really well. He's just up against, a guy who's on the top of his form and has had that much longer to bed himself into the team and into the car.
Yeah, I think, if we, talking about Gasly for a moment, he's been obviously linked with Renault/Alpine in the future, the whole French connection there. Aaron, do you see any chance of Gasly perhaps going back into Red Bull if they weren't to keep Albon? Or if not, do you see any, using a crystal ball, anywhere else for him on the grid in the future, sort of post the Red Bull stable?
I think in terms of Red Bull, I think that bridge was burnt. The way they really unceremoniously dropped him really I think, I mean, you give him a winning car, he's probably going to be tempted. But in the environment that is, and it is a team built around Max. To be honest, if he wants to be in that environment again, I don't know. I think going to somewhere like Renault/Alpine and trying to sort of establish himself as a star, really, rather than being a number 2 driver, I think he'd have a better chance of going somewhere like Alpine for the whole French thing for a start, and like I say, to establish himself as a star, show what he can do in a team that isn't in up against as soon as he walks in the door. I feel like he's got a better chance of flourishing there than he does at Red Bull.
Is Gasly better than Ocon?
Interesting question.
Yeah, I mean,
We don't have the answers to that yet, do we?
Ocon, I found one of those drivers who's been hard to judge this year because you can't really say that he's ever had the measure of Ricciardo in that Renault. But then you don't really know how much you can judge that because obviously Ricciardo's been in Renault for a year. He's bettered himself into that team. Like we've all said, that's so important for a driver. And obviously Ocon's been out of racing for 18 months. And Ricciardo is certainly a race winner. And you could definitely argue he's got the capability to win a world championship if he had the right car. So, yeah, it's hard to tell how Ocon's done this year. I'm glad that he's got a second year at Alpine next year. He's not on a 1-year deal and there's a chance of him not being there at all. So we can see what he can do in his second year. Simon, what do you think of how Esteban Ocon's been doing?
He's been pretty quiet, not as impressive as he was. I don't know, who did he race for before?
Force India.
It's India, yeah. I was trying to remember whether it was Racing Point at that point. But it doesn't seem to be that sparkle that he had. I don't know, maybe that's the Daniel Ricciardo effect. Because I think he's a top driver, and I think so. I keep moving it on to the next driver. I'm sorry about that, but no, yeah. Ocon's going to find it hard with Daniel, and he's going to find it even harder with Alonso. So I think he's really got his back up against the wall, and he needs to get some results, get some more points on the board, and really show what he can do before it's too late for him. Because I think if he gets dropped again by another team, I can't see him coming back from that. Now you can talk about Daniel Ricciardo. Yeah, Daniel Ricciardo. Do you think he's regretting leaving Renault, guys, or do you think?
I think it's a hindsight thing, to be honest. You know, at the time, McLaren looks like the stronger package, and I think they still are to an extent. I feel like Renault are resurgent; they are coming up, but I think McLaren are already where Renault want to be. So I feel like he'll think it's the right move. I think, like, again, he is the star, really. Lando is there, and he'll probably get equal billing, but you know, Ricciardo is the star driver there if you compare the two. But I don't know. I mean, just have to see how things turn out, I think.
I think that could be the missing link, having a race-winning driver back in the team and someone who's hungry for success. Not that the two drivers, Lando and Carlos, aren't hungry for success, but you almost need to have one in Formula One to carry on winning. And maybe just when he moves and he starts getting better results, that will pull Lando up along with him and the team.
Yeah,
I think that's right. I think but also don't forget, I mean, trying to have Mercedes engines again, and you can't beat having the best engine on the grid, can you?
No.
In the back of your car. I think Daniel's looking at that. I'm probably glad he didn't go to Ferrari, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
They've gone down and
going to Ferrari.
Incredibly, McLaren ahead of Ferrari, which we never would have predicted. I think last year, would we?
So we've now got Carlos moving on to Ferrari.
Sorry,
We're talking about Carlos moving on to Ferrari and whether he's regretting that decision.
I think that's something he's going to be. Well, no one's going to stop asking him that all year, are they?
Certain prestige to in the end of your career, no matter what's happened, I was a Ferrari driver. I mean, if you can't claim a world championship or a Monaco win, driving for a Ferrari comes pretty damn close. You know, I'm sure most drivers would take that.
I think so. I think that's something that I think Mansell said something similar to that. He didn't have a great time at Ferrari in terms of, he didn't win the championship. But I think he said at one point, the honor of being chosen by Ferrari kind of outweighs the fact that he was never able to win a title with them.
And I think he was actually chosen by Enzo, wasn't he, Warren?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
the last one's away.
He was the last to be signed by Enzo,
El Leone, they called him.
which is bonkers. And then he won the first race.
Yeah, in a car that wasn't doing well.
They didn't think it was going to finish at all. They booked an early flight. Booked an early flight, and then they obviously missed it because he won the race.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy?
That was the first year that they had the semi-auto gearboxes on those as well.
Isn't it crazy that one of Mansell's most memorable moments was in a Ferrari, Berger on the outside in Mexico?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I can't remember how long Sainz's contract with Ferrari is. I know it's more than next year, obviously. Yeah, I suppose he's got that sort of in the back of his mind that next year is going to be a real headache. But then there's every chance that Ferrari can produce a winning car in 2022. The problem, obviously, for them is their engine at the moment. That's the thing that's, their car isn't great either, but it's the engine that's really holding them back. And you can see that in Haas and Alfa Romeo. Whether they're going to be able to get on top of that is another matter, especially when you've got, obviously Red Bull. They're talking about potentially buying Honda's IP post 2021 to run their own engine, and they're asking for an engine freeze so they don't have to pay to develop it. That's something Ferrari aren't too keen on because they need to develop their engine to make it competitive again. So
this is their play, though. They can turn around to Ferrari and say, "Okay, you develop your engines, but we want you to supply us as well." And that could be a way around it. I mean, it's all.
I can imagine a lot of political wrangling going on over that. Yeah.
I mean, on the topic of Ferrari, what does everyone think about these rumours about Vettel and Leclerc? About how Charles is a lot better compared to Vettel's? Is that just down to driver ability, or do we think there's something under there lurking that there is differences in the cars?
Personally, doubt there's differences in the car. I think that more than anything, Seb's lost his mojo with Ferrari, especially once they'd told him he wasn't, his surplus to requirements. I thought he's almost switched off and concentrating on next year and his future plans with Aston Martin. And to an extent, you can't really blame him for that. I mean, I think he was always going to be beaten by Charles, unfortunately, as Daniel Ricciardo showed when he turned up at Red Bull. Vettel's a fantastic driver, but he's very, I wouldn't say one-dimensional, it's too extreme, but he has a certain way of driving. He can win from the front quite easily. He can overtake no matter what anyone says, but if he hasn't got a winning car, he can't seem to. In the past, he did. Obviously, with Toro Rosso, he won in a car that shouldn't have won, but he seems to have lost just that little tenth that made him special. And hopefully, move to Aston Martin, and especially owning part of the team, that will reignite his fire.
I think Vettel's a little bit similar to Schumacher in that, in the way that Schumacher kind of needed a team built around him, like we were alluding to earlier. And I think Vettel's quite similar. He's often been, I think it was said at Ferrari that they had troubles early on where he was trying to sort of manage the team as well as himself and manage the kind of design of the car. And I think he has that nature in him where he focuses so much on the details that when you know that you've got a teammate who's going to be behind you, not saying that Mark Webber was slow at all, but he wasn't he wasn't on the level of Vettel. So I think, when he can rely on the fact that his teammate is always going to be P2 behind him, he can focus on all of those details. But maybe when he's got a teammate like Ricciardo or Leclerc who's on a par with him, he's not able to focus on all those things he needs. I have my own hunch about the car. Not that it's not the same as Leclerc's, but I feel like maybe after 2017, there's been a bit of a disconnect between Vettel's feedback to the team and what the engineering side of the team want to do. Because I feel like that's when we started seeing a lot of his spins coming in. And I wonder if perhaps the team's got its own sort of direction on what they think makes the car faster and how they think to make the best car. And it's different to what Vettel actually wants from it and is asking from it. But certainly, like Simon said, he's just lost that spark this year. And you can really see that, I think, the way he doesn't seem to care whether his car finishes in the points or not.
He's got a hangdog look about him as well around the paddock, from what I've seen. It's not his normal jokey self, the Seb that we all know and love. It seems to have, not for the first time, Ferrari have done that to drivers before. They pull the plug on them before they pulled the plug on them. And, they're not going to be sharing information with him at this point because he's going to take that with him. And any updates, I'm sure from now on, they'd be mad to give to Seb. They're going to give to Charles and Sid. So I think it's,
Yeah. And they may even, just work to the clerk's ideas.
Well, they've got to
style,
now, haven't they? They can't put in building a car that suits Seb because he won't be there next year.
Because let's be honest, I mean, they're not going to, we know they're not going to. They'll want Leclerc to win anyway. They won't want Vettel to win, will they? Let's be honest. So, because they know the car is not going to win anyway, so they'll put everything in place for Leclerc and be working for next year with Leclerc. It's not.
Yeah, it's not brain science. It's brain science.
Yeah. So, it's a shame.
Yeah. Let's move on and talk about Vettel's teammate for next year, Lance Stroll. This is something that you brought up, Aaron, in our just before we started recording. The penalties that Stroll accrued throughout the Portuguese Grand Prix. He, as I said at the beginning, he hit Lando Norris during the race and picked up a 5-second time penalty for causing that collision, which I believe ultimately the damage to the car from that led to his retirement. And he then picked up another 5-second penalty for repeatedly exceeding track limits. I can't remember how many warnings it is you get before you then get a black and white flag, and then you get a penalty on top. 3 warnings, thank you, Simon. So you get 3 warnings, then a black and white flag, and then you get a penalty. So he did it a fair few times throughout the lap.
At the same point as well.
Yeah. Stroll's been one of those frustrating drivers to watch this year because he's always had criticism throughout his career, but I feel like this year he's genuinely put in more consistent performances. But then he still has races like this where he makes these clumsy overtakes and picks up penalties for silly things like exceeding track limits. Aaron, what do you make of, first of all, Stroll's performance at Portimao, and secondly, how he's been doing across the season?
I think every driver has one of them off days, like we do in everyday life, where nothing goes right for you. You've just got to grin and bear it, move on to the next one. Obviously, he was in trouble before, in FP2, I think it was, where him and Verstappen collided. Like I say, I think he just had one of them weekends where nothing went right for him. He's just got to move on, take his medicine, and come back stronger. In terms of the season in general, I think he's been a lot better. He's looked consistently quick. He's been showing that form that came with him from the junior formulas. Everyone said he's really quick, a really good driver, and he's not just here because his dad's minted. I feel like he has shown himself in a much better light this season, barring this weekend maybe. I think he's a lot better, and I think he could be a problem for Vettel next year, I think.
Warren, we're obviously moving on to Imola next week. Does Stroll just need to kind of, like Aaron said, just kind of dust himself down, try and put that behind him? Was it just an off day, do you think?
Yeah, very likely. I mean, the question you've got to ask is, how these moments of madness, if you like, where he goes a bit crazy, are they on tracks where he's not raced before? Because, you might find that it's just the lack of experience for that circuit that's leading to these crazy moments. I mean, that attempted move around the outside on Lando was never on. And when you're trying to brake on on that level of speed on and you're half off the track, it's not going to end well. It's not going to end well. He should have gone for the inside, really, or maybe went another lap.
And he's not going to lose his drive, is he?
No, which is really interesting, isn't it? But, if he was at Red Bull, it'd be a different matter, wouldn't it? Let's be honest. It would be a completely different situation. It's very interesting to compare, how teams deal with these slightly mad moments.
Just on the subject of penalties, while we're talking about them, I think I saw a tweet from Will Buxton. It said that drivers nowadays cannot physically get disqualified from a race, like they can't get black flagged. There's something in the rules where they will get penalty after penalty, and there will be summoned to the stewards after the race, and that's when it'll be decided if they're disqualified or not. Gone are the days where you're given the black flag and you're in, that's it. I think that's just crazy, to be honest. I mean, theoretically, you could reverse up the pit lane or drive the wrong way, and you won't get black flagged. I mean, I assume you would. I assume there's within reason, but
you could always just do what they always used to do and claim you never saw the flag and keep going.
Well, for Schumacher, did it?
Yeah,
Mansell did as well, and one of those races where he reversed to the pit lane and was black flagged and said, "Well, I just didn't see the flag."
Normally, one of those rules, like
what race was that? There's the question.
I can't remember. I've got a feeling it was one of the ones where he was driving for Ferrari. I think he crashed with Senna shortly after. Yeah, he overshot the pit box and then reversed back into it.
Wasn't it Williams where he came out of the pits and one of his wheels fell off, so they rolled him back up the pit lane?
Yeah.
There was that as well, yeah.
91, I think it was.
Why is that? Could that have been at Portugal?
Would you believe it? Yeah, it was the Portuguese Grand Prix.
I just had that in my head. I don't know where that came from.
That's probably why it's in my head. I'm sure everyone's been sharing it a lot over the last week.
Speaking to Chris.
Yeah, we need our stat man on here.
Okay.
So looking ahead to next week, as I just said, we're heading to Imola for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, which is much less of a mouthful than the official name for Mugello. I'm trying to remember what that was now. It's something like the Formula One Grand Premio dell'Oscar. No, never going to be able to remember all those words again. So we're heading back to Imola for the first time since 2006. Simon, what are you looking forward to about this race?
Well, some mixed emotions. You can't say Imola without thinking of Senna, can you?
And Ratzenberger.
Yeah, Ratzenberger. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And from what I remember, I just remember the dangers of the track. I don't really remember much other than it was a beautiful place in the middle of Italy that had, it's a bit like a principality, isn't it?
Royal Park, isn't it? Or is that Monza?
No, that's Monza, the Royal Park.
I'm getting mixed up.
San Marino is
in Italy.
They have too many beautiful racetracks there.
They actually have their own entry in the Eurovision Song Contest as well, I believe. But, there's much to be said about it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's it's a race in Italy, and they've got passionate fans that won't be there. So,
yeah.
One of the interesting things as well about the Imola weekend is it's going to be a 2-day weekend, which we saw by accident at the Nürburgring when Friday practice was called off. Warren, how do you think that the shortened schedule is going to impact the race? Do you think it'll be more exciting because of it?
It might be, bizarrely, because less track time means you've got less time to set the car up, and then I do lament the long weekend though. Lots of free practice, 2 qualifying sessions, one on Friday, one on Saturday. I do lament the loss of that though in the history.
Forward though, is it really?
But I suppose perhaps with less time on the track, then it'll be a bit more of a mixed up race. Depends what the weather does, doesn't it? If it's dry, you can just see Hamilton, can't you? 93.
Yeah. What do they do, I wonder, if FP1's called off? If it's pouring with rain and they can't run, if they have a repeat of what happened at the Nürburgring and they can't run FP1 or qualifying. I suppose they'll have to do qualifying Sunday morning, won't they?
Yeah.
Or championship order, maybe.
Yeah. Aaron, do you think they're going to be using the 2-day format as a kind of trial run for maybe changing it in the future?
I think so. I mean, they're always trying to shake things up a bit. They brought in, there was like a aggregate qualifying, and then they brought in the infamous eliminator qualifying. They're always trying to they always try these new things, and I think this 2-day thing could work because, frankly, I think there's too many sessions at the minute. I feel like they have like 3 FP3, you have 3 practice sessions. Just condense that into one qualifying, bing bang boom. You're probably maybe even saving costs because you won't have that. You won't need to bring that many tires, that many engines, etc., etc. I'd prefer it. I think it'd be a lot better 2 days.
Yeah, it makes sense. They want to cut costs. Just turn up on the Friday. Saturday morning, you have an hour or 2 practice, qualify. That's it. The only reason that they do, I can see for Friday, is that you get, if you want to go as a spectator, it's a cheaper ticket, to go and watch them for a few hours. But I don't see the point of it anymore. We cover it on the Twitter feed, but you don't really get much interaction. Most people are at work or busy doing other things, and there's very little interest in it from what I can gather.
I mean, I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever watched a Friday practice session, not the whole way through anyway. Only if something monumental was happening, but that's very rare in a Friday practice session.
We all watched because we thought Mick Schumacher was going to make his debut.
Yeah. And Callum Islet.
Oops.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting experiment. It'll be interesting to see if it does have any impact on the race. Like Warren said, maybe it'll mix it up a bit.
If we're going to have a Friday run, why don't we have, young drivers or something?
Yeah.
You don't need to see we know what they can do. They know what they can do. If they don't know how to race a circuit, they'll probably raced it on Formula 1 2020 or previous editions anyway. So
that is something that's mandated in the new rules. I don't know whether that's coming in next year or they've pushed that back to 2022 as well. But the teams will have to field young drivers for so many free practice sessions in the year. I don't think it's any more than 2 practice sessions though. So
let's tease these drivers. You might get a drive, but really the chances of actually getting a driver.
You just want your money. That's all.
Yeah, we just want you so that you don't complete more than 2 Grand Prix and can still satisfy this rule.
Yeah. Got more chance of winning the lottery than being a Grand Prix driver now. No. 20 drivers is just, Can you name an elite sport anywhere that only has 20 professional sports?
I suppose your chances might go up if you change your name to Nico Hulkenberg. Then your phone might ring quite a few times in the weekend.
And he'll have to have a coffee and a cake in his hand.
So to close out our debrief of the Portuguese Grand Prix, shall we talk about our drivers of the day? Simon, should we start with you? Who's your pick who's your top driver of the day?
I'm going to have to go with Lewis on this one. He lost a couple of places at the start, and that was when the action really was. He was aware enough to know that his tyres hadn't warmed up and kept his cool and just hunted Bottas down. He seems to be playing a bit of cat and mouse with him with the weekends now. Let Bottas have those Fridays and those early qualifying Q1 and Q2, and then from Q3 I'll bring my A game and and play with him a bit. So yeah, for me it's got to be Lewis. 92 wins, and he did it all in style, didn't he?
Warren?
Gee, there's a question. I think I'm going to go with Leclerc. Outperformed that car. Finished fourth. Could have been a podium if something had happened to one of the cars in front. I think I'm going to go with Leclerc. Yeah, totally outperformed the Ferrari.
And Aaron?
I mean, in the words of Alan Partridge, can I just surprise you, Lewis Hamilton? It's not a surprise, really. I mean, yeah, he won the race and it was fairly processional for him, but like we've been saying all through this debrief, to break the record and all that sentiment that goes with it. If you want to go off purely the race itself, I'd say Pierre Gasly personally for getting up to 5th place.
I've always got time for Alan Partridge references in this podcast. I think I'm agreeing with all of you. I'll probably go with I'll agree with Aaron most of all and say Hamilton and or Gasly for my picks. I'll sit on the fence.
Maybe a little bit of Charles in there as well.
I'm just glad they all had a good time.
Didn't they do well? Didn't they do well?
That's probably a good note to end on.
Brilliant.
Thank you all for listening. Be sure to leave this episode a like and share it with your friends, and follow the Pit Crew online on social media. I've been James. You can follow me on Twitter at James16Matthews. Simon, where can they find you?
At F1 Taxi.
Aaron?
Twitter, so Aaron Airwin 7.
And Warren?
Yeah, Warren, Pit Crew WRC editor. Find me on there for all your WRC needs.
Excellent. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you out on track.